You know, when you promise stranger things, the worst thing you can do is start to be too comprehensible. I'll explain that a little bit when I start to go off on some of the stuff I didn't like about this in specific. But yeah, Stranger Things 4, I've now seen it. Despite my now just implying that I don't like any of it, there's actually some good stuff here. However, this season takes a while to get going. There's an entire subplot that feels deeply unnecessary and I have less than zero interest in. There's another subplot that is relevant and decent up until towards the end of it that was dragged out all to hell. And then there's one plot thread that I'm like, this is where the good stuff is. And yeah, I'm reminded in a lot of ways of the problems that I had in season 2. So I'll get to some of the good stuff, but like, here's the thing. The good stuff, and the good stuff that's here is really good. To my taste and my way of thinking about it, good stuff's about 40% of this. And again, that 40% is real good, but anyways, so where do I want to start? Well, let's not burn all the goodwill off at the front end. Let's start with one of the problem areas. California. The California, I'm not going to explain the plot to this. You either love the show and have either watched this already or you don't care, in which case I'm not going to be your Cliff's Notes. So the entire California end of things. So that's Jonathan, Will, Mike, initially 11, but then she spirals off into her own thing. And Argyle. I hate Argyle. He is a terrible, annoying, generic, stupid character. He's the kind of character who I would only be okay with him if he had decent performance chemistry with somebody, but he doesn't. He doesn't have good chemistry with anybody, not even Jonathan, his friend, who is supposedly the reason he's wrapped up in any of this. I hate him so much. Most of the new characters I don't like, to be completely honest. So, but even setting Argyle aside, this is illustrative of a problem that this show has had since season 2, which is well, we have to use them again because they were in previous seasons problem. This is not a problem unique to Stranger Things, but Stranger Things is very nicely illustrative. Season 1 has been, and I think will always be, the best season of this show because everything that was there for a reason. Every character who was present had something to do, had a function, whether they were directly involved in the plot or they just were helping to better explain and give rapport to another character. Everybody was there for a reason. But starting in season 2 was where we would have characters who, if you were to lay out the story of season 2, and again here in season 4, if you were to lay out this story, forgetting that it's a continuation of previous seasons, if you were just laying out the story, there's a whole bunch of characters that you would not have created because you don't need them and who are only here because they were here before. Mike, Jonathan, Will. Those are the big ones. Mike and Will in particular the show has struggled for stuff for these two to do. And Jonathan, I'm now realizing in season 4, I've never been a huge fan of Nancy and Jonathan, but I'm realizing now Jonathan's the problem half of that. He is dead weight, and she, not being particularly tied to him in this season, is so much better. I like her the best I think I've ever liked her in the season. Not that I hated her, but I never really liked the Jonathan and Nancy stuff. But she's so much better when she's not being dragged down by him, and he's just here because he's always been here, so he's here. Ugh. And also, the California stuff had part of what made this really hard for me to get started. I complained about some of this stuff on my friggin' Obi-Wan Kenobi reviews, of all things, because I was trying to get through this at the same time as I was watching new episodes of that. But I hate the high school stuff. I really hate it. These characters are not bad characters. They're not uninteresting characters. However, they're also not interesting enough that I care about their high school drama. I like them when they are in the bizarre, twisty, dangerous situations that they've been in since season 1. But when you spend the first 2 episodes largely just showing them dealing with high school crap, wow, do I not care. Now, this particular aspect might be aimed at people, not me. Maybe it's aimed at people who are not so completely over high school nonsense the way that I am. And look, that doesn't make it inherently bad. I'm realizing as time goes on just how deeply done with high school settings that I am, if for no other reason than I'm 40 now. And it's not that I can't remember or relate to what it was like being in high school. I still have pretty strong memories of what high school was like, the good and the bad. However, I'm distanced enough from it that while I do remember what it felt like to think that everything going on was deeply important and mattered, I'm now also old enough to know it really didn't. And so watching other people go through that stage where they think any of this matters, that they think the school bully or, whether or not this person likes them or whether or not they have social standing with this group or that group will ultimately matter. I can't relate to it anymore. And again, I understand. I'm not saying that these characters shouldn't care about it or it doesn't matter to them. It does. I know it does. I remember when it mattered to me, but it doesn't anymore. It just doesn't. I can't. I can't with high school anymore. Thankfully, things got better once we got into episode 3, and then episode 4 was rightfully praised as having the best stuff in it. So let's leave California behind. Let's deal with one of the other plot threads, because there's 4 major plot threads. There's California, there's Hawkins, there's 11, and there's Hopper. So let's now we dealt with California. Let's deal with Hopper. Hopper's pretty decently handled, all things considered. I wasn't sure how well that was going to work because he's separated from everybody else that we normally have a connection with. Although Enzo, I forget the character's actual name, but the guard who's trying to negotiate him out, to getting paid to do it, who's played by the guy who played Jaqen H'ghar on Game of Thrones. He's real good. He's one of the few good new character additions. I liked him. He was solid. So that helped a bit. And also, Joyce and Murray play off each other pretty well. Like it would get bored. It would like walk right up to the border of cringe humor territory with the two of them. But it even stepped over a couple times, I think, but it never quite leapt over that line to a point that I stopped enjoying them. And also Yuri was kind of fun, as ridiculous as he was. So while that's hardly what I'd call the highlight of the show overall, that is a plotline that does not drag things down. And I think all the performers involved in that particular plotline handle themselves pretty decently. So let's now talk about the best stuff, which is what's going on in Hawkins. Now, initially, there is some high school nonsense, some of which lingers around for a while, namely in the form of Jason, who, wow, was that another character that this show really didn't need and who is deeply uninteresting. Like, I had no interest in this guy. And he stopped showing up after episode 5, but he's going to come back because where they ended with him, like, that was too big a deal to not have that circle back with consequences. But boy, do I not care about this kid. So I don't dig him. I actually, the one initial lifeline that I had was the Hellfire Club. And I actually really liked the juxtaposing of the D&D game and the basketball game. And plus that got us Erica. Like Erica's great. She's not in this enough. She needs to be like properly integrated into the team full time. She's still like a part-time with this whole group. She needs to be around on a more permanent basis. She's great. So this has all the best stuff. Partly because this has the characters who I like the most. Dustin is the member of the original 4 who at this point I like the most and I enjoy the most. I'm not going to say the others never have good moments, but Dustin by far of the original 4 boys has consistently the best and most frequent good moments, partially because he's frequently paired with Steve. I've talked about why I love Steve before. Steve is great and wonderful and amazing, and I will never tire of Steve. And of course, with Steve comes Robin, and Robin is still great. And now we have Nancy added into the mix, and Nancy, free of Jonathan, is wonderful. Although I really don't need this whole thing of, oh, maybe she'll get back together with Steve. No, don't have her get with anyone. She's actually doing great on her own. Well, I say on her own. She actually gets paired off with Robin, and those two are really good together. Not to the point that I'm shipping them, although if they want to do that, I'll take it over Nancy getting back together with Steve. But like, Nancy doesn't need a guy. Let her be investigative journalist doing it for herself, because she's actually really good at that. Can we stop saddling her with relationship nonsense? I get that Steve's still hung up on her, because like Steve is Steve. I get that half. I just don't really want it to be reciprocal. Max, that actress does a lot of great emotional work, both in line delivery, but also just expression. She conveys a lot of pain really, really well. So she does great. New character who I like Eddie. Eddie, I was on the fence about initially, with the sort of hair metal stylings and the leather jacket, and he's DMing. But then when I saw him, initially with the gaming group, and I'm like, okay, maybe. And then like I've gotten to see more of him, like I actually like this guy. And again, he has a slightly different dynamic from anybody else. So what he brings isn't redundant, but does add to the overall vibe. He's scared, he's terrified, he's a little bit of a coward inherently, but he's not completely devoid of a conscience or a drive to try and do the right thing. His impulse is to run. And he's in a situation where running so far has kept him alive. So I get that, and that works. Obviously, I mentioned Max. I got to circle back. Episode 4, that was great stuff. And the use of the Kate Bush song, really, really well executed. Very well done. However, that does bring me to the one thing that like I have even less love for at this point than Argyle, and that's the villain Vecna. But you know what? Stick a pin in him. I'm going to go off on him at the end. I mentioned one other plotline. That's 11. Now, 11's is the plotline that is decent. It's relevant. It's not boring. But boy, is it ever stretched out to hell. Part of it, this is structural. The first issue is that the whole thing of like her in this room and every other participant in this thing that she was there under the guidance of Papa, they're all dead and it looks like she did it. Like that's teased scene 1, cold open, episode 1. And then we don't really get a resolution on that until the 7th episode. And so we're just waiting for the damn thing to get to that already. And most of what goes on in between isn't exceptionally interesting. I mean, there's only so many times you can watch kids going in concentration. And it's just, it gets old. And like another part of the problem with this is I don't know why they brought Matthew Modine as, what is the guy's name? Brenner? Papa? I don't know why they brought him back. I get why he's here for the flashbacks. Makes total sense. He's good for that. I don't know why he's still alive. Because I can't think of anything that he does that couldn't have just been done by Paul Reiser's character, whose name I can never remember. Owen? Is it? I don't know. I'm going to call him Paul Reiser. Because, like, first of all, he's way more interesting. If he's going to be the one to be putting 11 through this, but we know he doesn't want to do something like this to any kid, especially her, but he feels it's necessary. That's way more interesting than he's just bought in and is listening to a guy who we know is crap. Like, that's way less interesting. Having it be him and just using Papa for the flashback stuff, that makes way more sense to me. Maybe it'll matter in the last 2 episodes of the season, but as of right now, I do not understand why you would bring him back to life. It serves no purpose, especially because all of his most effective stuff is in the flashbacks. Every time it cuts to him in modern day, I'm bored by him. In the flashbacks, there's a sense of ominousness to him that is lacking whenever it cuts to him now. I think maybe it's just because I know he doesn't need to be there. So 11's whole story and the flashbacks and learning of stuff, like, I get it. It should be here, but it's dragged out. It's paced badly, and there's some superfluous elements. But then there's also the very end with how it feeds into Vecna. Okay, let's talk about this guy. All right. The instant I first saw Vecna, I was already worried because he just looked like a dude in serious prosthetics. And the instant he started talking, I was like, oh no. And it's not because the voice is bad or the voice performance is bad. It's not, but it just feels wrong. Here's what I've loved about Stranger Things at its best and from the beginning. I shouldn't be able to wrap my head around all this. Things like the Demogorgon was weird and alien. The Mind Flayer was strange, and you didn't know what motivated it. To the point that even when they brought it back in season 3, it's like, what is it doing? Because I never felt like I fully understood exactly what its intent and its goals was, and yet it was still acting with clear intelligence. That is wonderful, especially with something like the Demogorgon. It's behaving, very just bestial. But at the same time, I'm like, is it no more intelligent than an animal? Or is it just intelligent in a way that I'm not able to recognize because it's so far outside of what I know how to understand or comprehend? Is it planning, or is it just ravaging an area? I don't know. And I love not knowing. This is part of why I didn't like the Demodogs in season 2, because it felt like just derivative. Like, it just felt like, well, it's the Demogorgon, but smaller. Like, do something else, do something stranger, do something weirder than that. Like, the Mind Flayer is nicely weird. It's a bizarre concept, and I don't know if I could properly explain it, and that's good. But a dude who talks, yes, his techniques were interesting in terms of, like, the clock and latching on to people, and they start to get the headaches and the nosebleed. His process was interesting, but he as a character, as a villain, every time I saw him, I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. And I remember thinking to myself, I think it was around episode 4, because he did a chunk of talking to Max. And I think it was episode 4 or 5. I had the thought, he better not turn out to just be some dude from our world who ended up in the upside down, the inside out, ended up in the upside down and now is just, somehow controlling it or whatever. It better not be that. So the end, where we find out that, yeah, it's basically that. And the twist of him being this guy who was attending and caring for the kids, and he was the one who actually killed everybody, even though it looked like it was 11. I didn't know where they were going with it in terms of what would ultimately happen with him, but I called that guy turning out to be 1. Like 3 or 4 episodes before the reveal happened. I called that. And so that didn't surprise me. It didn't catch me off guard. And the instant he brought that thing to mention, I'm like, oh, he's the villain, isn't he? It's a restraint and he's the villain. And yeah, I was right. And I'm not mad because I was right. It doesn't help that I was right. But I'm not mad because I was right. I'm mad because, yeah, he's got these powers, but he's just a guy. He's not this creature or this being or this intelligence that I hopefully will never fully understand, because that's the stuff that worms its way into your thoughts. I'm like, oh man, but do I actually understand how it works? And I want the answer to be no, but like this, I got to come up with a name for this rule. But I feel like I'm prepared to propose a law of storytelling that a villain's overall quality is inversely proportional to the amount of time they spend explaining their villainy and or origin. Because this guy, between the stuff that he says as Vecna and shows to Nancy, which in context, why? And the stuff that in the flashback he says to Eleven, again, in context, why? Between those two things combined, which as far as being presented is basically a continuous monologue between him at two different points in his life. That's 16 minutes of him explaining why and how he's the bad guy. This fucking sucks. And I was liking episode 7 up to that point. It was real good. The tension of the Demogorgon facing off against Hopper and the other inmates was real good. There was legitimate tension with how the group that was stuck in the Upside Down was going to get out. It was a great moment where Nancy was making the crossover from the Upside Down to our world and just fell and appeared to keep falling. That shook me. I was like, what just happened? That was great. And then Vecna started talking and didn't stop for 16 minutes. I hate this guy. He's so generic and boring. And he emphasizes why it was so important that the Mind Flayer and the Demogorgons weren't able to monologue like this. Because they couldn't explain themselves, they got to be mysterious and dangerous for how much we didn't know. Now we know this fucking dude. I feel like I know everything about him, and I don't care. I don't care, and I'm just left going, you are now way too comprehensible to be the villain in a show called Stranger Things. You are not stranger than what we've already had. You've just got more lore that doesn't interest me at all. And it's such a shame because like the haunted house stuff is well done. And like I said, his MO is pretty interesting and decent, but it's not the worst villain I've ever come across, but he is weak. He is weak sauce for this show. In a show where the best things about it are tension and atmosphere and mystery. The fact that our villain this season is effectively a dark wizard who just talks and talks and talks and doesn't shut up. That's not good enough. We'll get to July. We'll see what the last 2 episodes of this season look like. Supposed to get one more season after that. Spending the last 16 minutes of the last episode that's currently available on this guy did a lot to suck my interest away. But we'll see it when it comes out. Until then, what do you think about this season? Again, the stuff that's good I think is great. It's just the stuff that's good isn't most of it. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. I have a strong suspicion I'm going to get laid into. Because this happened with season 2 as well. At the time, I didn't really like most of it. And most people did not like the fact that I didn't like most of it. I feel like history has bared out my assessment a little bit more. I feel like more people now look back at season 2 and go, which I did at the time. I don't know what people feel about this. I haven't really checked. But whatever your thoughts are, down in the comments, let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. Patreon's what pays the bills. Allows me to do this rambly nonsense. And also other stuff down below, links to stuff. I've got Pride merch for Pride Month. If you want to check out my merch store, link in the description. But don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. All right, I've got thanks to give for my Patreon supporters. Robin Moore, Zubin Fala, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Linda Walters, Imudelki, The Oath of Boyd, TT, Phernobulax the Poodle, Zach, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasperl, Toku BL Hoovian, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. The Rats and I thank you.